So we are at the end of chapter 4. Be'ezrat Hashem, hopefully we will get to chapter 5 today. And we're talking about bitachon in Hashem with regard to Olam Haba. It's a little bit apropos, isn't it? In light of what we're dealing with these days. Anyway, so the shir should be to Refuat, the Rosh Yeshiva, Nasan Note ben Rachel, and also Refuat Shlema to Eitan Eliyahu ben Rivka Liza, and unfortunately, Leilui Nishmas Moshe ben Leah. All right, so that's what we have to keep that in mind now. So there's actions or mitzvahs that we get reward. He says, Gmul ha'olam hazeh. So he says, where's the... Yeah, وَهُوَ فِي ثَوَابْ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. So al-dunya is in this world, and there is al-akhirah, the next world. So there's some things like this, some things like that. Now he says, on penalties, the Torah tells us all the punishments that we get in this world. So when we think of reward and punishment, we sort of say, reward has to be necessarily good, and punishment has to be bad or painful. And it's not necessarily, because he brings under the category of gumul, of reward, the penalties that the Torah brings us. So if we do certain sins, so at least in my shir, we're dealing with a particular topic of betrothed young girl who has a status of being mikudeshet, right? She's engaged, and therefore anyone who has relations with her is subject to penalty of death. And then we talk about whether it's this penalty or that penalty, but it's clear that the Torah tells us what happens. You look nervous. What's going on?
Me?
Yeah, you're looking at the screen. Like, is there something off?
They're just making sure the sound's right.
And?
Yeah, it's all good. I don't know if Cab does that, Rabbi.
Cab is a low service. He just presses the button and that's it. But you're noticing this, the job that you gave him, there's no doodling.
You can doodle?
He can. He is fixed on what's going on. I'm sure that now if he films it, I could do an action series over here. Doing like the whole MacGyver stuff over here, and he'll follow every frame. So we know about penalties. And he says, now with regard to the reward in Olam Haba, the Torah doesn't tell us too much. And why is that? This is because he says that لأن صورة النفس دون الجسم مجهولة عندنا فضلا عما يلذ في تلك الحال, and so on and so forth. So he says we can't understand the form of the soul without a body. It's not known to us. Do you know what brings you pleasure? No?
Yeah.
Yes? Can you give an example? Keep it clean. It's for family. It's a family show.
No, of course.
Yeah.
Talking to my mother.
Talking to your mother gives you pleasure?
It makes me happy, yeah.
Good. Good. All right.
Pleasure's subjective.
Pleasure is subjective. That's true. Anybody else? What brings you pleasure? Yeah, no.
Being creative.
Being creative. In what sense?
Creating art and music.
Okay, good. Catch a ball.
Getting my passport back.
You're not getting your passport. Your wife called the embassy and says, listen, under no circumstance shall you give him the passport.
I need it.
I know you need it back, but she's going to make sure you're not getting it. She's going to get your tuchas deported. Call Trump. As soon as you land back. Vive la France. Nobody has pleasure eating?
No.
Really?
No. Food is fuel.
You know, a student put one here for me. Now we have to have this concert. David, I don't know. What are you going to do in Sde Eliyahu without all of this? Tov. What gives us pleasure in this world? Sleep. When you're tired and you get in bed and you put your head on the pillow, don't you feel amazing? It's just this feeling, and when you're eating a nice, juicy piece of meat gives pleasure. I don't know. I have pleasure in that. No? Jack's like,
You're calling me, that's what I was going to say. Ribeye.
a ribeye, nice ribeye. Okay, good. In Nebraska, they used to have corn-fed beef. And that was, we used to get buffalo meat, kosher buffalo meat, or venison. Those are really gamey, but they're very, very good, juicy. So those things give pleasure. That is, we can describe what we get physical pleasure from. But what is going to be pleasurable for the neshama independent of the body? Do you think in Gan Eden they have jacuzzis?
Spiritual jacuzzi.
A spirit, what does that mean? When you say spiritual jacuzzi, what does that mean?
I don't know.
Good. So you would like saying things you don't know what they mean. Good.
More like the idea of
Don't say like one more time. That's it.
your mitzvahs. There's an idea that your mitzvahs can translate into it's more.
He said like.
More of a palpable idea of you do a mitzvah, you get $1 million, right, in Shemayim, right? And you could be riding around in a Prius or in a Lamborghini, right?
No.
But not in a physical sense, in a spiritual sense.
There's no riding around.
Not literally.
There's no physical space.
No, there is no physical space.
So there's no riding around.
But it's more like.
That one was used
It's
correctly.
more like.
Now that was used correctly.
It's more like
You're visiting and you're telling us what the rules are. Wow.
It's more of this idea that your neshama will have some grandeur if you have
Grandeur?
grandeur.
Grandeur.
Grandeur. Oui. Je comprends. Oui,
The
oui.
Frenchman over there in the corner.
Bien sûr.
Versus if I didn't do so many mitzvahs,
You have less grandeur.
I might even have a afflicted neshama or a dirty neshama. I might be embarrassed. So the idea of grandeur, what's called Lamborghini versus Honda Civic, So maybe I'll be
Tough.
chilling in that
I
hot tub.
Chase, first of all, I should tell you that I really appreciate you participating and doing the best you can, trying to describe something that's impossible to describe. So for that, it's very important. So for us, we're all laughing, but lamaise, this is the essence of the problem that he's talking about. That when we are coming to describe what will be the experience in Olam Haba, we only have physical terms to compare it to. Except one thing.
72 virgins?
No, it's a 72-year-old virgin. They misread it. No, I don't want to get into. We're not doing intro to Quran studies. What I wanted to say is as follows: Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, in a book called The Kuzari, which is a little later than this book, but written in the same milieu, same geographical area and intellectual zeitgeist. I know I'm using academic terms, university terms, so you have to be sort of, blah, blah, blah. So Rabbi Yehuda Halevi explains that when we describe the Torah, when the Jewish people describe Binyamin, Olam Haba, you can yawn, Kadima, give it a good one. When we describe Olam Haba, which the Amoraim describe it, they are basing their description upon the experience we had in Har Sinai. What happened on Har Sinai was that Hashem spoke directly to every single Jew. And when they heard the voice of Hashem speaking to them, the neshama left every single body. So when Hashem says, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, the neshama is left. And they were resuscitated, the neshamas were brought back, and then there was a second commandment. And again, the experience repeated itself. That's why, according to Chazal, the Jewish people turned to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, please tell the Kadosh Baruch Hu that he will speak to you directly and you tell us what he wants. Because we can't go through this neshama leaving the body every single time. It's too much. Which means that according to the Kuzari, we already experienced as a nation what is Olam Haba, and they were all brought back. Which means we know that in Olam Haba there's no eating, there's no drinking, there's no sex, there's no walking, there's no sitting, there's no... All of those physical terms don't apply.
No hot tub.
No hot tub. And no chicas calientes either. Yes, Liam?
I have a question. So I was at a museum recently, a Jewish museum.
Oh, well, if it's Jewish.
Jewish museum. And then we were trying to attract a white audience. So there was an exhibit that had kind of a provocative title. And
You're going to tell us what the title is?
Trying to attract a
it had to do with
white audience.
sex.
What?
It had to do with sex. And it was like sex and Judaism. But
Sex and Judaism or
it's
in
called-
Judaism?
It's called Jewish sex positions or something.
Oh.
But okay. But when it was an analogy, it was not what it actually was about, but I said it, people wanted me to say it. So anyway.
Oh, it's my fault now.
It's
You blame me. Go ahead, Liam. Ask your question. I'm with you.
okay. Pretend I didn't say anything, but there was something like, I don't know if it was, I don't know the credibility it has, but there's like a thing on the wall that had a quote from Chazal and it says like, Olam Haba is full of like learning and sex or something of that sort. I don't know if that's...
Learning and sex don't really go together. We do a lot of learning, here. I'm not familiar with that Chazal.
Okay.
It does say that in Olam Haba, the tzaddikim wear crowns that Hashem put on their heads, and they are with the Shekhinah learning Torah. That I know.
Okay. I should have taken a picture. Quoted it.
Well, I don't know. I don't want a picture. It sounds like
There was nothing. It was black.
a Jewish museum, and that's how they want to attract people.
Yeah.
Judaism and sex. What do you think? That's our new Kiruv program? What?
I think it would work pretty well.
Yes, but it can't be co-ed. He's like, not Kohen. Back to the shower buddies business. Yes.
Was the reason that the Jewish people didn't want or wanted Hashem to tell the commandments to Moses because their neshamas was leaving? Was the issue because it was unpleasant for the neshamas to leave, or was it unpleasant because for the neshamas to come back from the world?
It's not clear. The Gemara in Shabbos doesn't say why, but it was a difficult process. There's a Gemara in Brachas that it describes a different phase of a person's life. And Rav Dessler has a little mahalach on this. It's very, very deep. So that when a person's neshama is about to leave the body, it could either leave the way that you pull cotton off the plant. And if you hold a plant of cotton and you pull, right, you can just imagine what happens to what?
It doesn't really work.
Well, it does, but it leaves the strands. It sort of yanks it, or that's one extreme. To the other end, it's like getting a piece of hair out of a glass of milk.
Like Aaron.
Just what?
The way Aaron died.
Oh. He doesn't even understand what you're saying. What?
The way Aaron died. His neshama.
Do we what?
The way Aaron.
The way that Aaron died. Yes. Or Moshe Rabbeinu. Or Miriam. Or other tzaddikim. That's it. It's better than nothing. You want the seat, Avi? We can make Noah move one. You're good? Where you going? So I don't know what the answer is for you, but it sounds like it wasn't a pleasant process. Because the bodies also flew. And the angels had to bring the bodies back. And it was very powerful. It's a Gemara in Shabbos, Pei Chet Amud Beis or Pei Tet. Just look over there. It's like 89, 88, 89, around there. It tells you. Are you drawing me? 'Cause doesn't look like my nose. So he says the Torah doesn't discuss Olam Haba. Kuzri tells us we know what Olam Haba is. That's why the rabbis never tell us that we're going to get all this physical pleasure in Olam Haba. Because they know it's not like that. Whereas the other religion, says the Kuzri, all they know is human pleasure. So they tell you whatever the human pleasure is, multiplied by 72.
That's 72 guys that fix your computer.
Okay? Now we got the joke. But there's a rule here, Yosef. You have to know that. I make the jokes.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay. But now I know if I'm stuck and I need jokes, I'll come and ask you. You give me one-liners.
I think we already got that. The 72 people fixing your computer. You just call up, tech support in India.
Wah, wah, wah. Ay, ay. David, so I'm going to continue if that's okay. What word didn't I say today? Huh?
Much better.
Which word? Forgot.
No, we don't call it that. We call it.
He caught himself. Yesterday, Yitzchak, because I didn't see the Pidyon Aben. So he had a Pidyon yesterday. And he told me, he says, that's it. I did Pidyon, no more donkeys. So, fine. I have to respect his wishes. Okay. So, he says like this. He says, the status of the neshama in the next world is that the neshama is going to be similar to angels. once it leaves the body, if it was purified and made holy through her actions in this world. So the status of your neshama in Olam Haba is dependent. It's kind of like what Chase said, is what you did in this world. Therefore, he says they didn't really describe too much of this. And it's not in the Torah so much because at the time, once they left Egypt, the Jewish nation was not at a very high madrega. You couldn't discuss very deep things. So therefore, he says the Creator treated them in the way that a father teaches a little child. That he wants to teach him slowly, with patience. And he teaches him Musar and brings him to higher levels, but he wants to do it in a gentle and soft way, because if he gave him everything all at once, then the Jewish people who left Egypt would not be able to handle it. And so he says that the whole point was that the Kadosh Baruch Hu guided the Jewish people through a process of learning and growing spiritually in the desert because they weren't really prepared. They came from a world of idol worshiping. For us, it's very difficult to understand this, but they were living in Egypt for more than 200 years. How many generations are 200 years?
8.
How much?
8.
8 generations?
8 to 10.
How did you get to that?
About 20 years a generation.
20 years is a generation? I think that's a little too much. Isn't it? Yeah, I was more like with Yitzchak. 4 or 5.
Like a mom has a kid and then 20 years to grow up until there's another kid.
I thought it was 10.
10 generations?
No, generation is 10 years. 20 generations.
20 generations?
Yeah, generations.
Oh, okay.
I think Nazi government also
No, no,
took
no,
like
no.
4 generations, 2 generations.
Wait, so you said 200 years?
200 years they went back.
I think, gentlemen, I think we're talking about 4 to 5 generations.
Yeah, it's 4
It's about 40, 50 years.
I thought a generation is 20.
No, 50.
You want to take it outside and fight?
Okay, my bad.
They had no notion of any other thing. And remember, the Egyptian culture was the most dominant, both militarily, economically, socially, culture at the time. The pyramids were about 1,000 years old by the time we're talking about, when the Jews are in this period. Jews did not build the pyramids. Okay? They did not build the pyramids. If your teacher told you they did, that's what the Torah says. They spoke Egyptian. They knew the religion. And it affected them. And so says here, the Chovos Halevavos, that the Kadosh Baruch Hu did not discuss Olam Haba with them because they wouldn't understand it at this stage. And so in his analogy or his metaphor, he says that when you start educating someone, you want to give them things that they enjoy. So for little kids, you promise them candy, sweets, right? You give them a shekel, they go to the makolet and buy a piece of gum, and they're happy. But you can't do that to a 19-year-old. Like if I gave my kids now a shekel, say, go to the makolet, knock yourself out. But 5 shekels, buy shoko and You guys are expensive to raise, especially you. You have good taste. We need to have a l'chaim tomorrow. I have to get something. How's the weather tomorrow? Do you know? Is it going to be this cold? You here tomorrow? Good. So, what? What time? You don't have to hold your phone. It's not. Oh. It's like power. Mhm. But is it you have it rained? We're gonna get rained out.
It's at night. During the day, it's going to be more sunny. It's up by 40 degrees.
If it's sunny at night, you're in the wrong hemisphere. I don't know how this worked, but in our world, right? At night, it's not sunny. It's called the moon. These Africans, you bring them to the civilization, they think they're
They call it loonies? The moon, like,
moonies. Ay, ay, ay. He thinks at night it's going to be sunny. What?
In Iceland or someplace it might be.
Not in South Africa. No. But he says later on you start giving the child clothes, get him a nice car. That's a good incentive. Right? You have a car back in South Africa?
My parents have a car.
They have a car, but you don't. You have a car, your own car?
Yeah.
What do you have?
Ford Fiesta.
Ford Fiesta. That's... What kind of car do you have back home, Mike? A Mazda 3. You have a car at home waiting for... Good, because you're not going back. You're staying here, no?
We'll see what God has for me.
Well, what do you want? You want to go back? Going back is going to LA. You're going to go back to LA?
I want to spend time with my family
But in Los Angeles?
in Los Angeles.
Okay. So. And he says, and sometimes he has to threaten him in this parable that if you want to motivate the child, there are two ways of motivations, and you need to use both. Positive and negative. And the negative is threatening him with starvation, like withhold food. So it says, I'm just reading don't get mad at me. Erom means nakedness. Take his clothes off. It won't give him any clothes. Hitting him. Remember the good old days. You remember that? Did you sit like this in school and they raise your hand like this? If not, they make you like a piñata.
They get the ruler.
He doesn't know what a piñata is. You know what a piñata is? Oh. Some kids are made into a piñata. Piñata is a paper mache. You make an animal with paper mache and you fill it with candy. And then you hang it from the ceiling and you give a kid a stick and he has to hit, but you put the blindfold and he usually hits the father. But it's very funny, those videos. But that's a piñata.
And what is the pinata usually shaped like?
I was gonna say.
I was not going. I am not using that. That's not. I have better material than that. Not when I have a writer. Yosef is going to be my writer. He's going to write up all the jokes before class. I'll go over it, practice in front of the mirror and see how it goes. So he says, so sometimes you have to use violence. And he says later on, when he gets older and his intellect gets stronger, then he's not going to learn Torah. This child isn't going to learn because to get some candy or to get some, nicer jacket or get a, fancier car. He learns for the sake of learning, that he enjoys the learning, that he sees the benefit of learning. Just like you're all here for one reason. You're here to learn Torah. Because you're not making money now, are you, Hilly?
Maybe, Rabbi.
Burnt. Who promised you cash if you stay in yeshiva?
I don't know, not for like a job on the side.
You have a job on the side?
Like, if I feel up to it.
What?
If I feel up to it.
If you feel up to it, you could waiter.
Yeah.
Did you get permission from Rabbi Geffen? Because if you want to work while you're in yeshiva, you have to get permission from Rabbi Geffen.
Work in the yeshiva or?
Anywhere. You have to have permission from Rabbi Geffen.
I'll ask him.
It's okay.
Not to detract from the,
Oh, not to, which means he.
which means I will, but
Yes.
I just looked up the word that he used on this thing in the museum was toshmish, which I guess could be translated to sex, but
Yeah. David, have a good afternoon, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
but ChatGPT can't find that verse that says
It's not a verse.
that pasuk.
It's not a pasuk. I know verse and pasuk mean the same thing. It's a term that appears in Chazal many, many times with the connotation of. You can pop somebody's eye out with that.
Oh yeah.
That refers to intimacy between a man and a woman.
The word?
What's the word? Don't worry. What do you care? It has nothing to do with you.
Torah.
It's Torah, yes. For married people, they need to know this word. For people who have been banished to Golus, I don't think there's enough Kamina for it. He still thinks that, his wife's sitting there waiting for him to come home. She called the embassy, like, make sure this guy can come back. And he's saying, Rabbi, that's not true. She would never do that to me. She said, for better or worse. Actually, she didn't. Because she just does this, and you put the ring on the finger and come out. I tricked the guys in my shir, and I asked them, what does a woman say under the chuppah when the man says, "Hareat mikudeshet li betabad zu"? What does she say? And they were all stumped. Like, yeah, what does she say? Nothing! Doesn't need to say anything. She just has to put the finger like this. You put the ring and come on. And then you live happily ever after.
Unless she throws it in the fire.
Huh?
Unless she immediately throws it into a fire.
No.
No.
No. Because this is already there under the chuppah.
Oh.
They were already talking about it. This is a different din. Nice try. Nice try. And I don't think she would do that. She got all dressed and got her family and everybody. But when you go into the yichud room, she's going to let you have it. She's going to let you, like, you did this to me? That took a turn, didn't it?
Only because I know exactly what he's thinking.
Oh, you know what he's thinking.
I don't know what I'm thinking.
Not you. He's talking about Yuda.
Oh.
Listen, this is a family show, but they have a certain idea in their mind that they need serious help. I'm telling you, if they come to any other rabbis in Ohr Somayach to be a reference, forget it. Until they get this worked out. They need some really serious therapy. What?
Just said what me and Avi have been saying when we go to the
No, it's not what he said. That's what I'm saying. That's why I laughed. It wasn't because of any other reason.
All right. We're going to stop the recording now, and then I'll fill you in. Don't go yet. We're not done with this year. But let's stop the recording.